for 5 minutes.
Ask unanimous consent to revise the Senate remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, when the President arrived in Australia the other day, he told the Prime Minister, quote, "We're kicking ass in Iraq." It's a clear sign he intends to keep a massive U.S. military force in Iraq as long as he remains in office. And stated official administration policy next week. "We're kicking ass in Iraq" might be the headline of the report the White House is writing for General Patraeus to deliver to the Congress next week. It's supposed to be an objective military assessment, but the President has declared it will be a White House spin document, as usual. Here's what the President's kick-ass assessment translates to on the ground. 10 U.S. soldiers killed so far this week. 793 U.S. soldiers killed so far this year. 3,752 U.S. soldiers killed since the beginning of the war, and 27,186 U.S. soldiers wounded since the beginning of the war, and 71,000 documented Iraq civilian deaths since the beginning of the war, although the actual number is much higher. As the Times of India newspaper said today, Iraq is getting worse day after day after day. We don't even know how bad things are. The ACLU filed a lawsuit the other day demanding the U.S. release military documents concerning the number of innocent civilians killed by the U.S. forces. They fear the government is hiding the human cost of war. We don't know, but reliable information does exist. There's plenty of factual information for the President to rely on, but he won't. An independent commission of retired U.S. generals released a report today that concludes that the Iraqi National Police Force is so corrupt the force should be disbanded. These U.S. military experts concluded that the U.S. Iraq Army, over the next 18 months, quote, cannot yet meaningfully contribute to denying terrorists safe haven. The GAO released its own independent study showing the Iraq government has reached only 3 of the 18 benchmarks established as part of the U.S. continuing to fund the war. In case anyone thinks that achieving 3 of 18 isn't too bad, let me tell you what they are. The first benchmark we achieved was passing a law that legally protects the rights of minority parties in Iraq, except the minority Sunni population remains outside the political situation totally. The other 2 benchmarks the Iraqi government achieved were setting up a security and a public relations office to support the military escalation. But the White House will use the military brass to paint a much rosier picture next week in its report to the Congress. Besides the kick-ass assessment by the President, there have been recent reports trying to bolster the administration's position. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a story appearing in today's Washington Post. It's on page 16, but it ought to be on page 1. The headline is, "Experts Doubt Drop in Violence in Iraq. Military Statistics Called into Question." I urge everyone to read this important news story. The only conclusion one can reach is, here we go again. We're kicking ass is the kind of assessment you hear at a football game. And the PR game is clearly on by this President and his minions. They will claim progress next week and tease the American people with talk of token U.S. troop reductions. But because it's coming from this White House, the only thing certain about next week is that it will be their latest attempt to try to mislead us into believing there are enough bullets and bombs and U.S. blood to prevail in Iraq. The best military in the world is being run into the ground by this President. That's the only truth the evidence supports. Don't believe anything else. The American people had it right in November, and they still have it right today. The U.S. must end its occupation. There is no other choice for this country except to continue to shed the blood of our people and waste the resources of this country in Mr. Bush's failure. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair would remind members that they